taking seriously a recent upsurge in spitting and the vandalism of Christian sites.
Christians in Jerusalem's Old City say they've been repeatedly assaulted. So how are Christian leaders responding?
Christian citizens feel attacked in their places of prayer, in their cemeteries and on the streets.
Christians in Jerusalem's Old City say they are often harassed, spit on, and even physically attacked by religious Jewish youth. Recently, Israeli Channel 13 reporter Yossi Eli went undercover as a priest for a day. Dressed in a robe, he walked through the Old City with Franciscan Father Alberto. In the first 5 minutes, he was spat at 5 times by Orthodox Jewish Israelis.
Jewish people wouldn't tolerate these sorts of attacks against them. In other countries, they're very vocal about it, and they shouldn't tolerate it here when their own co-religionists carry out similar attacks against Christians.
Welcome to another episode of Political Newbie. I'm Noah Clark, and this is a space for newbies to politics like me, an average citizen waking up from a dream and simply trying to make sense of the mess that I find myself in, and I thank you for joining me. So I'm going to start off this episode with a bit of a mind bender, okay? You ready? I wasn't born into religion. However, I was raised a Catholic. Ooh, twisty. No, I'm kidding. It has to do with being orphaned, but we will leave it at that. As a child, my environment was very abusive, and there were a lot of contradictions between my lived experiences and what I was learning in church. So naturally, I had a lot of questions, but those questions were either ignored or dismissed with the command, don't do as I do as I say. And I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with that command. By the time I was a teenager, the accumulation of abuse brought me to a breaking point, and I eventually turned away from God and religion. And over time, I noticed that most of the religious people I met were living in a way that completely contradicted what they preached, which ended up validating the view of religion and God that I had formed as a child. But it's impossible to escape God and religion. It's everywhere. And now that I'm older, the entire concept is really starting to hit me differently. There has to be something to God and religion, right? If it's so pervasive and so inescapable, why is it, though, that there's so much evil attached to it? Like, for example, why would Jews spit on Christians and say awful, defamatory, and insulting things about elements of the Christian religion, but then simultaneously say that Christians should serve Jews and protect them and worship them? They do say that. And why is a religion that respects and venerates Jesus, Islam, more demonized than a religion that believes Jesus is burning in hell? See what I mean? It's so jumbled up, and it makes absolutely no sense why religions that are so good have so much evil attached to it. Now, here is where it gets super duper creepy, okay? If you made it this far, I'd love to see you in the comments. If not, leave me a thumbs up to let me know that you're here. Thank you so much. I came across this podcast the other day where Danny Jones and Catherine Austin Fitts, one of my favorites, were having a 3-hour chat, and the topic of Christianity came up, and they pointed out something that I haven't heard anybody talking about. Listen to this.
Have you noticed this recent phenomena of essentially a lot of big shots in Silicon Valley are mapping Christianity now? There's a new church in Silicon Valley that everyone's going to. You know, Peter Thiel is a famous billionaire gay Christian, and the guy from Y Combinator is a big devout Christian, and they're holding these big conferences, and all these folks in Silicon Valley seem to be now converting to Christianity, going to church. It's just really interesting to me, because Silicon Valley is historically known for being like anti-religion. A lot of people developing tech and developing, these social media platforms, transhumanism, and somebody like Peter Thiel would be somebody who's, very much tied up in the military industrial complex, the intelligence community.
I would say that there is a non-alignment between the teachings of Jesus Christ and what Peter Thiel and his companies are doing.
Yeah.
First of all, yes, the New York Times and other publications did publish an article about this. Headline, Seeking God or Peter Thiel in Silicon Valley. Okay, this is weird because I literally just did, my last episode had a clip of Jay Dyer, who is like this guy who sort of like writes a lot about how pop culture is programming all of us. And one of the ways in which they're programming us is to sort of merge the concept of AI and God, to conflate the two. You know how like the Zionists just love to conflate everything? And so hearing this right now is freaking me out. It really is. But listen to the rest of what they're saying.
I wonder if it has something to do with trying to bolster Christianity in the United States, or sort of revive Christianity in some sort of a national security aspect.
National security aspect is where he got me. What does Christianity have to do with national security? So Catherine hadn't heard about this news before this conversation that she's having, and she comes up with a guess. Listen.
The problem is that there has been so much financial fraud and corruption that you have a real breakdown in productivity in the general population. You know, there is a vested interest if you don't want to depopulate everybody and getting everybody to be productive, and they're not going to be productive unless they believe in morals and have morals. Our problem, the reason the unipolar model failed, in my opinion, is we're not agreement capable. And the leadership is not agreement capable, but now the message is the population, you don't need to be agreement capable. Mm-hmm. And when a complex society depends on the rule of law, or at least the appearance of the rule of law, you take away the ability to be agreement capable, and the society fails.
First point Catherine brings up is, if the deep state, or the powers that be, has a vested interest in preventing depopulation, which I don't think any of us believe, then you would want your population to be productive, right? And it becomes more challenging when there isn't a national sense of morality, hence why they're placing emphasis on merging AI with Christianity. At least that is my interpretation of what she's saying. And as much as I value and depend on her insight, I really do, the morality bit isn't sitting well with me. Especially, as it turns out, the tech and AI moguls are mapping and preaching evangelical Christianity. Based on the stats, older generation evangelicals are pro-Israel, but among the youth, the stats went from 75% in 2018 to 34% in 2021. That was 4 years ago. Imagine where it is now. Could this Silicon Valley move be about recapturing the youth? That would be my guess. I could see that being national security related if you need to find new ways to indoctrinate the youth or the future leaders of America and the world, really. But then Catherine brings up a very interesting take on aspects of the Bible that wasn't easy for me to skip over because of the varying degrees of pure evil that seems to have always existed, but we're seeing amplified by technology today. Listen to this.
Yes, so I think you have interdimensional intelligence, which is operating demonic intelligence.
Interdimensional demonic intelligence.
Yep. So I think this thing about good and evil is real. Yeah, I can't find it anymore. I found it once. There were in the 30s, a British physicist got up and said, you know, we are being manipulated, but from other dimensions by intelligent beings from other dimensions. I think, you know, if you study Christianity and you read the Bible, you're dealing with both divine intelligence and demonic intelligence. And I think too much of the leadership has gotten deeply involved in the occult and demonic kinds of intelligence.
If you're not a deeply religious person, this sounds so wild, outrageous even. Like interdimensional demonic intelligence? What are we talking about here? But after seeing things like this all over the internet...
How many Palestinians have you killed?
I told you, 13.
How long were you in Gaza?
82 days. How much it take to take off this vest and clean on the Palestinian baby's blood? I killed like this, you know, like took a baby head and cut it.
That everyone that seeing our soldiers now in Gaza fighting can't say words like genocide or like baby killers. We do, however, and it's important to say, kill babies.
It is important to say, however, we kill babies. But don't you dare actually say out loud that we're baby killers, okay? Yeah, that's called Zionist logic, okay? Just cancels itself out, right, in real time. Or, you know, when I read things like this, Smotrich saying last August, it might be justified and moral to cause 2 million Gazans to die of hunger, but world won't let us. What causes religious people to not denounce this? And I mean vociferously and unequivocally. No matter how evil you think Hamas is, God and religion is supposed to prevent you from succumbing to the absolute worst of your own evil impulses, no? It's people like me who are not like deeply entrenched in their faith who should be doing this, saying this, accepting this. No? Isn't that the logic of religion or belief in God or faith? And there are many evils that we can be talking about right now, but there's something transcendent about having a front row seat to Israel's high-tech, AI-powered killing spree against a predominantly non-combatant civilian population of mostly elderly, women, and children for 2 years. Haven't even gotten to Hamas yet, by the way, a ragtag band of rebels in comparison to Israel's mega military force. And there are God-fearing people publicly celebrating this and calling for the complete annihilation of every single soul in Gaza. In the very least, you can say, well, you know what? I don't agree with the indiscriminate massacre and the genocidal statements of senior Israeli officials who are part of decision-making in this military campaign, and then follow up with some excuse as to why you must still relish the complete destruction of a group of people. But you're not even doing that. And not saying that that's going to be good, but like, you don't actually have the impulse or the instinct to even do that. It's just pure hatred and evil. And I really have not encountered an abundance of that kind of evil from any other religious groups, mainly Christian and Jewish Zionists, to be very specific. I'm sure there are others, I really do, but they're not mainstream. They're really not mainstream. So is it just mental illness, or is Catherine Austin Fitts onto something? Here's a bit more on what she had to say about interdimensional intelligence. You ready?
So I've tried to find every theory to explain the paranormal stuff. So I'm not telling you this is true, but I just finished reading a book called Final Event by Nick Redfern. I don't know if you've ever read it. Mm-mm. It's a exploration of a group of military intelligence in the United States called the Collins Elite.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about the Collins Elite. Yeah.
And they came to believe that the ET phenomena was a demonic phenomena. And one of the things he discovered, or the Collins Elite apparently discovered, is in many sort of ET abduction events, if you called on Jesus Christ, it would stop.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what he reported. I mean, I don't know anything about him, but it struck me as someone who was trying to do a faithful job of simply reporting what they found.
You know, there's a lot of folks in the intelligence community that publicly state how they believe that the whole UFO phenomena is like this biblical thing, how it's angels and demons.
I think we are dealing with demonic and angelic forces in our world, and that's interdimensional intelligence. So the Bible calls it, demons and angels. Other people call it fifth dimension or whatever.
Aliens or interdimensional beings and Jesus Christ. And military intelligence people actually believe this. Okay, all right. It could very well be insanity, right? But we do know that our very powerful leaders, especially the unelected that are pretty much responsible for policy making, are into the occult. What if they believe the occult and this too, or some version of this? And could that have anything to do with the founders of Palantir's newfound focus on Christianity? And yes, it's evangelical and most likely Zionist in character, but isn't Zionist Christianity fundamentally anti-Semitic? Well, it is, according to this ex-Christian Zionist podcaster who's been sharing her experience in the faith and what she was taught. Listen to this.
There's a lot of, I think, a conflation of critiquing the state of Israel with anti-Semitism that's honestly so destructive to Jewish people who deserve rights and autonomy and safety and human dignity and all of these things. But equating them with the statehood of Israel, I think, is inappropriate, to say the least. Because at the end of the day, it's still using, the Jewish people as a pawn, as tools to bring about the return of Christ, the return of Jesus, according to Christian theology. I was even taught that Jewish people who don't convert to Christianity will ultimately be destroyed in the final judgment. It's almost like anti-Semitism is baked into Christian Zionism. Does that make sense? So I don't think Christian Zionism is about loving the Jewish people or being, standing up for the Jewish people in the first place. I think it's about using the Jewish people to fulfill a Christian agenda. And that's not solidarity. That is exploitation. And it's just, again, another manifestation of the harm that this belief system spouts.
Yeah, I had no idea these religious beliefs were so destructive. What the hell? Again, we are electing people with these beliefs into government positions to write policies that govern us. I'm still not clear on what the relationship is between Christian Zionists and Zionist Jews. And reading this article from the Times of Israel made things a whole lot more confusing. Headline: Stop platforming good Jews. It's a pernicious form of anti-Semitism. This was literally yesterday. What day? What time? Yesterday. You really cannot make this up. So good Jews are anti-Semitic for the bad Jews? What are we where are we going with this? Who are these people trying to make sense of these wild ideas and think we're gonna buy it? What section of the population is actually buying this madness that they're selling? Whoa. Then I encountered a Palestinian Christian who was teaching a Muslim a little bit about Jewish Zionism. And I'm not sure if this is straight Judaism or just Jewish Zionism, but apparently Jewish Zionists are building a third temple in Israel, like right now, as they await their Messiah that's not Jesus Christ. Listen to this guy who does a decent job at simplifying this for the stupid, ignorant folk like me.
All this chaos comes from one piece of land that was taken by these people, and they called themselves Israel, which is a very important biblical name. Even in the Quran, it's mentioned to confuse the whole world. That is what the devil does, because these people are waiting for their Messiah. And it's not the Muslim Messiah, not the Christian Messiah. It's their own Messiah, which to me, that means they're waiting for the Antichrist. So in order for them to get their Messiah, they want to build the third temple. And the Christians here are saying, the real Christians that know Jesus, they're like, hold on, Jesus was the third temple, because he said, if you break the temple, I'll build it back up in 3 days. He's talking about his body. If you break it on the cross, I will build it back, which he resurrected. So that's the third temple. And me, as a Christian in Christ, he lives in me. I'm a temple. That's why I'm supposed to not ruin my temple, watch what I do with my body, all these things, because I'm a temple of God. So the Christians that know there should not be a third temple be like, hold on, that's Antichrist, that's satanic.
That last word there was satanic. So let me get this straight. The Christian Zionists are using the Jews because they're waiting on the return of Christ, and the Jewish Zionists are using Christians because they're waiting on the return of an Antichrist? So at least now it makes a little bit more sense why I see so many Jews spitting on Christians. But it really doesn't feel like a very healthy relationship between the religions, I have to say. So now as I am exploring faith and religion and how belief in God impacts people's conscience and judgment, I feel more confused than ever. I really do. I came across this clip where a group of Jewish boys say that in principle, they need to kill Christians and would be happy to do it because God told them to, based on a book called the Gemara. And if anyone thinks that God is part man, like the way Christians do, they need to be killed. And it's not up to God to do it, it's up to them, and they need to clean the world of non-Jews.
אם הם עובדי עבודה זרה, אז אנחנו צריכים למוס בהם ולשקט אותם ולרמוס אותם ובעיקרון גם להרוג אותם, כי הרי גוי חייב בשם המצוות בני נוח, ואם הוא לא מקיים את זה צריך להרוג אותו. אבל... אתה תהרוג מישהו? אם הייתי יכול, הייתי מוצא לעשות את זה, אבל אין לנו בית דין, אז אנחנו לא יכולים לעשות את זה. אוקיי. אבל זה אמונה של מישהו אחר. זה אמונה שמישהו מאמין בה צריך להרוג אותו.
מי שמאמין שהאלוהים שלי הוא חלק מאיש, אז צריך להרוג אותו. מי שמזלזל באלוהים שלי, אז אני אהרוג אותו. אז זה לא, אבל זה תפקיד שלכם, להרוג או לרעוק, זה לא התפקיד של אלוקים? לא, השם אומר לנו מה לעשות. הוא אומר, זה כתוב, להרוג? איפה? איפה כתוב? היהדות תפקידה בעולם זה לעשות טוב, לגרום שהעולם יהיה נקי. כן. אז כל אדם שיאמין באיזה בן זונה אחד. אבל איזה זה כתוב? אבל איפה זה כתוב? איפה זה כתוב בגמרא? אתה רוצה להביא גמרא? אנחנו יכולים להביא גמרא ולראות. אבל הגמרא זה כתוב על ידי אנשים, לא על ידי... על ידי אנשים שהקדוש ברוך הוא שלח. חכמים שכתוב בתורה של להקשיב להם.
Okay, first thing, I've never heard about this book called the Gemara. I've heard about the Talmud and all these other, the Torah and those things. Never heard about the Gemara. So I don't know, how many books do these people have that all instruct them to kill Christians and all non-Jews? It's weird. I'm sorry, but do evangelical Christians believe something similar about Jews and non-evangelicals? Because Donald Trump just gave the evangelical Christian AI titans and co. the freedom to database all Americans. The guy who thinks it's okay to kill useful idiots. Listen to Palantir's CEO.
So the primary source of death in Palestine is the fact that Hamas has realized that there are millions and millions of useful idiots that will... Okay. Like, if your argument was so strong, wouldn't you let me talk? It's so strong. It's so strong. It's so strong. Your argument is okay. Thank you for.
So he wanted to make an argument about the fact that he's using Palantir's AI tech in Gaza to help Israel kill civilians, or useful idiots, sorry. That was recorded on May 5th, okay, like a month ago. We already know that Palantir's technology is not killing Hamas, right? Because Hamas has barely been touched in the last 2 years. It's killing 99% civilians. When he says useful idiots, is he saying it's okay to target them because they might as well be Hamas? What is he going to say about you and me if he considers us useful idiots after they finish cataloging every American civilian, well, pretty much every single person that lives in this country? And if you haven't heard or already forgotten, Donald Trump's big beautiful bill is designed to give full control to AI systems and how they police us, neutering the state's ability to regulate AI, which means that this guy and his friends, Alex Karp and Peter Thiel and all those people, will have unlimited access to us. And you know, when they deem you a terrorist, a domestic terrorist, anybody in plain clothes, they don't even have to show you a badge, can come up to your house or come up to you on the street and snatch you away in an unmarked vehicle and take you to God knows where, and not even tell your family or friends or anybody where they're taking you. Not even like have you access a lawyer, which is what they did to Mahmoud Khalil when they first abducted him. So this is where we're heading. And just so that it's not lost on any of us, I'm going to say it. Donald Trump was elected to make government smaller. He has just made it infinitely large, almost to the point where the idea of a small government is done. It's gone. It's pretty much communism. Donald Trump is doing that in record speed. Imagine the kind of federal algorithmic policing that will happen when BLM, pro-abortion, men and women sports, open borders government is in charge of the policing. Yes, MAGA, this is the reward of blind loyalty. Speak up. Speak up now. You see it. It's happening. Just to give you an idea of what Palantir specializes in, they offer tools for intelligence gathering, target analysis, and potentially assisting in battle planning. Their AI-powered software has a strategic partnership with the Israeli Ministry of Defense to provide technology for war-related missions. CEO Alex Karp, the guy we just saw, has publicly expressed strong support for Israel and stated that the company's products are in high demand there. Palantir's technology is used to identify individuals who are likely to launch lone wolf attacks or lone wolf terrorist attacks, facilitating their arrests preemptively before the strikes that it is projected they would carry out, aka pre-crime. Remember when people were talking about this during the Donald Trump campaign? Pre-crime. Now they can just arrest us for crimes we didn't even commit. Imagine that. So here we are. Whether you're an atheist or a Christian, our lives are being lorded over by religious fanatical Zionists. What's even more bizarre is why Christian Zionists are made to believe that Jews are especially beloved more than everyone else. And I'm not talking about the Christian Zionists in leadership positions because I think they are inherently anti-Semitic, but like the Christian Zionists who are following along blindly. They are made to believe that Jews are especially beloved more than everyone else. Listen to an Orthodox Zionist Christian make his case as he debates another Christian.
What does Paul say? Does he say that they are beloved for the sake of their forefather?
Well, yeah, but you're also...
What does that mean?
You are also beloved for the sake of your forefathers.
No, the Jews
you are
also
beloved for the sake of your forefathers.
So the Christian is making the case that we are all beloved by God, and the Zionist Christian is like, no, the Jews are especially beloved though. What am I missing here? What am I missing here? The Christian Zionist is saying, no, you don't understand. Yes, we are all beloved, but the Jews are especially beloved, especially.
St. Paul says, "For I could wish that I myself were accursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my brothers, the kinsmen according to the flesh, Israelites, by flesh." This is what he's making fun of. This is not what I'm saying. "And to them belong the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law, the worship, the promises, the patriarchs, the race according to the flesh is the Christ, who is God over all, blessed forever. Amen." Does anybody else fall into this category, Andrew, except for the Jews?
Yes, we
No.
are Israel. We are beloved of God.
Andrew,
we are the fulfillment of the promise.
Andrew, Paul talks about two Israels. If you have an understanding of what he talks about here, you would see this in the Orthodox Study Bible, which says that he's talking about two Israels. One is the natural Israel, one is the spiritual Israel.
Okay, are Jews above Orthodox Christians?
Doesn't matter.
Are they?
Doesn't matter.
Are they?
Doesn't matter.
Answer the question. Are Jews above Orthodox Christians?
No.
Okay, no. Thank you.
Do you acknowledge that Jews
That's
are
the end of the
especially
argument.
beloved?
That's done. It's done.
The Zionist logic really throws me for a loop because Rip Van concedes that Jews are not, at least not more beloved than Christians. And then he goes on to argue that Christians weren't given the covenant and Jews were. So Jews are especially beloved. By definition, that makes Jews more beloved than Christians because they were given the covenant and Christians weren't. You see what I'm saying? It's like circular logic. It makes absolutely no sense. Listen to the rest of it.
So Jews are especially beloved
But so
among
are
all
you,
the other
Rivin.
nations.
You're
No.
also especially beloved due to your ancestry.
Were my ancestors given the covenants? Were they given the law?
Then,
Were they
so
given
then
the
they're
adoption
above
of
Orthodox
glory?
Christians?
No.
So what makes
No.
what makes Orthodox Christians then equal with the most beloved of God?
You're strawmanning
Rivin?
it. You're strawmanning it. You don't understand the logic here. Actually, if you want to think about it, in comparison to somebody who is not a Christian and who is not a Jewish, yes, they are beloved more by God.
So then he says Orthodox Christians and Jews are on the same level in terms of being loved by God. And then he says, no. What he meant was Jews are more loved than non-Christians. So that would mean that Orthodox Christians and regular Christians are on the same level with the Jews, and it's just that Jews are more loved than non-Christians. And then it finally collapses into him arguing with an audience member that he only said that Jews weren't more loved than Orthodox Christians. So he flip-flops on this, like, just listen, my God.
The Jewish people higher than any other non-Christians.
I never said...
Yes, you did, Ridvan.
No.
Yes, you did.
All right, hold on. I'm clarifying it for you here right now. I never said, and I will never say, that God especially loves the Jewish people more than Orthodox Christians. And I will never say that God especially loves the Jewish people more than Orthodox Christians.
Yeah, this is a Douglas Murray, Sam Harris type logic that I was talking to you about a few episodes ago. In conclusion, Jews are not the chosen people. Jews and Orthodox Christians are the chosen people, according to Rip Van's logic. Where does that leave regular Christian people? Oh. They then argued about whether or not it was a Christian's moral duty to support/fund a secular state that supports the rise of the Antichrist. It just gets more bizarre as you go down this rabbit hole.
In my opening statement, I never ever argued that it is an obligation for Christians to support Israel.
30 minutes later.
If a robber comes into your home, you could just leave it up to God to handle it. You don't have to do anything. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I don't know.
Still supposed
Does it sound like you're the most beloved? Does it sound like you're the most beloved?
You are still supposed to fulfill your obligations.
Okay.
You are still supposed to fulfill your obligations.
Okay.
I never ever argued that it is an obligation for Christians to support Israel.
He literally said that if Israel is in trouble, you have to fulfill your moral obligation to help them. And then he goes on to say, I never said it was a moral obligation. This is Zionist logic. I'm just mapping this out for you because it is wild and it happens so quickly you may miss it. And this is a Christian, right? Christians literally have to contort themselves into pretzels in order to defend Zionism and another religion. And I wonder if there is a total lack of awareness that every logical argument that they try to make, they automatically cancel it out within the same sentence, almost. Another thing that I find so difficult to wrap my head around is why Christian Zionists think that Muslims are the only threat to Christianity when the most recent Christian Holocaust around World War II was conducted by the predominantly Jewish Bolsheviks.
Do you acknowledge, Andrew, that the Jews are actually in an extermination war for their survival right now?
Yeah.
Do you also acknowledge that if they don't have the support that they need, the other side wants to exterminate them, which you just acknowledged, basically, and that they could be exterminated as a result?
For the sake of argument, that if the United States were to pull out support from Israel tomorrow, that the nation would be exterminated. Let's just grant it, right? As horrible as this is, nobody wants to see anything like this. That's still not an ought for why Christians have to support them, Rivin. Still not making the moral ought claim for why Christians have some moral duty to step in on behalf of a secular Zionist state that has religious components that wants to name Antichrist. Can we please get to that?
Do you acknowledge that if Israel is destroyed and the Jews are eradicated in the region, this will lead to the re-establishment of the historical enemy of Christianity?
I'll give you the logical acknowledgement. It could. Can you give me the logical acknowledgement that Western nations can also prevent this from happening even if Israel's not there? Logically.
They can't. When the Jews are done, then the Christians are next.
When the Jews are done, the Christians are next. And without Israel, we don't stand a chance. We can't protect ourselves without Israel because we were just falling apart before 1948. We were a complete mess. Christianity. By the way, right around that time period, like I said before, the Jews were annihilating the Christians in Russia. And is it true that Hitler was responding to that? Anyway, look, religion, it's mind-boggling. And yeah, I have to side with Andrew Wilson on this one, the regular Christian. Israel made a choice to impose itself on a land with a people and made a choice to ethnically cleanse the population and terrorize the region for 77 years. Why are we obligated to support this? Rip Van can't even convince himself properly why Christians have a moral obligation, even though he said that he never said that Christians have a moral obligation to support this insanity. I mean, are Zionists saying that they get to dictate what we deem morally right? Because he's saying it's morally right and it's a moral obligation to support and fund Israel. Who's deciding what our moral duty is and our moral obligation is? Because it does not say in the Bible that we have a moral obligation to support the state of Israel that was created in 1948. It's not like I read the Bible and know this for absolute certain, but not a single soul, no expert, no religious expert, no historical expert, no regular person has ever made the argument that the Bible says we have a moral obligation to defend and support the state of Israel that was created in 1948. And why on earth are they jumping through so many hoops to protect Israel? Is just what does not make sense to me. But according to the ex-Christian Zionist and a Palestinian Christian, it has to do with dispensationalism and the end times. Listen to their version of this.
I was not taught specifically about this interpretation of the Bible known as dispensationalism, but I'm learning more about this framework that became popular in the 19th century thanks to theologians like John Nelson Darby. And according to him, God has divided history into distinct dispensations or time periods of God's divine plan. And in this system, apparently the nation of Israel plays a starring role in the end times. And what's interesting about that is there's a lot of historical textual analysis that suggests that all of these interpretations were added way, way, way after the book was even written. Almost like a reverse engineering of what these prophecies mean. Now people are reverse engineering how some of these scriptures obviously spoke about COVID. Obviously, the Bible predicted COVID, even though we literally never heard of anything like that before COVID happened.
They believed in something called the rapture. They believe that before Jesus Christ comes back, there's going to be 7 years of tribulation. But before the 7 years of tribulation, these true believers, the Christians, they're going to be raptured, taken out somewhere, another planet with Jesus where he's going to protect them. Who cares what happened to Palestine? Who cares what happened to the Middle East? Who cares what happens to America? I'm going to get raptured. So the rapture is a false indoctrination by a Scottish witch implemented in Schofield Bible, John Darby, dispensationalism. It becomes a thing. But Jesus says in the 7 years of tribulation, Christians will be persecuted. And I can see how that's going to happen because right now, I guarantee you, within a year, they're going to call some scripture in the Bible that talks about Jews killing Jesus, they're going to call it anti-Semitic. And they're going to start censoring verses in the Bible. And if we allow them as Christians to do that, to censor our Bible and say we can't say this because it's anti-Semitic, that means the whole Bible and Jesus Christ is anti-Semitic. So that's going to be a war because the true believers will rise up.
As fantastical and fictional as all of that sounds, our leaders are actually putting these things into beliefs. They're making each day, each month, they're taking a step towards turning almost everything into anti-Semitism, which is in itself anti-Semitic. But just the other day, the Virginia governor signed an executive order last week backed by a Jewish-Israeli influence operation to report an attack school children deemed anti-Semitic, targeting students from K to 12. That's like age 5 to age 18. Any child can be tagged in the state of Virginia beginning from the age of 5 and will be hawkishly monitored and probably sent off to re-education camp if necessary. I mean, at this point, the sky is the limit in terms of what they can do with a kid that they deem anti-Semitic. And if your child develops some gender dysphoria along the way, they may supply them with hormone therapy without parental consent. And if you refuse to vaccinate your kids, the state can now take them away from you. At least in Massachusetts. Here's a headline in a publication called News Media Newsroom from Massachusetts. Massachusetts seizes 5 children after parents refuse infant vaccination on religious grounds, and that has sparked legal and public outcry. They're now saying to hell with religious exemptions. You have to take the vaccines. You have to inject your newborns with this. So listen, they're going after our children hardcore. My point is the people in charge are nutso, and they will not hesitate to take any kind of totalitarian steps towards canceling every ounce of freedom you have left. Instead of a Christian nation, we are now a Zionist nation, successfully convincing Christians to worship Jews.
I just want to say this to our Christian friends, just to call it as it is and say it straight out, you guys are worshiping one Jew. That's a mistake. You should be worshiping every single one of us, because we all die for your sins every single day. And that's exactly what's going on here. Yeah. We're all God's firstborn, and we're dying for your sins right now because the Jewish people in the land of Israel are the bulwark against the orcs. Mm-hmm. Okay? The orcs are coming not to a theater near you, but to your home.
Oy vey. Meanwhile, Jews are being taught to kill Christians, and Christians are being taught that 2/3 of Jews will die in the rapture. It's really hard for my small brain to understand what this really strange relationship is, but it sounds toxic AF, and I sincerely want no part of it. But it does make you think about this idea of interdimensional demonic intelligence that Catherine Austin Fitts and the military intelligence group, the Collins Elite, talks about, because of how twisted this all is. Well, I did enjoy Catherine's take on this biblical claim to Palestine that we've been willing to destroy our principles of American democracy for. Listen to this. I thought this was really interesting.
Would be like what's going on in the Middle East with Israel and the Muslims, Israel-Palestine thing. When I think there was just some lady who was, I think she was up for some position in the UN, right? Like the ambassador to the UN. And she was in front of Congress, and somebody asked her, like, do you think Israel has a biblical right to the West Bank? And she goes, absolutely, Israel has a biblical right to the West Bank.
Then she hasn't read the ancient scripture. That's a bunch of hooey. Ask Farrell. Farrell has a PhD in patristics from Oxford. And get him to explain it. It's all a bunch of hooey.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just an organized crime syndicate who's great at spin.
Her words were kind of jumbled, so I didn't really understand. But the woman he's talking about is Elise Stefanik. And the guy she's referring to, who holds a PhD in patristics from the University of Oxford, is Joseph P. Farrell, who's a good friend of hers. And patristics is the study of early Christian writers known as the Church Fathers and their works, which is directly related to religion, specifically early Christian theology and history. The point is, all the experts seem to have very different interpretations, don't they? Yet so many millions have died on account of an interpretation. I grew up on Jesus, and as I begin to revisit him, Jesus sounds way more appealing to me, I have to say. I haven't heard of Jesus telling anyone that it's a moral imperative to kill non-Christians or to spit on non-Christians whenever you have the opportunity. And there certainly isn't a bunch of footage all over social media showing non-Zionist Christians behaving like deranged lunatics against other religions or Muslims abusing Christians for fun. I'm sure it exists, but there is an overwhelming abundance of Jews attacking Christians and Muslims for fun, and as if it's a condition for their survival, like they don't have a choice but to attack Muslims and Christians. Anyway, Catherine did have some good news that I wanted to share before I go. Take a listen to this.
It seems like it's things are getting harder for the younger generations to do anything nowadays, especially with like interest rates going up. People can't buy houses. People can't afford to borrow money. Universities, the job market, who knows what the job market's going to look like in 10 years with AI.
So there are solutions to all of that. If we were to change the financial liquidity on the ground, we could make things wonderful for the young people. And the young people could, build companies and lead us out of this. So we could revive Main Street. The money is there and the ability to do it is there. I mean, that's all possible. But it starts with recognizing the way we're going isn't going to work.
This actually made me feel a lot better, to be honest. She does offer some practical advice for changing the financial liquidity on the ground, and it has to do with debanking from the big banks and finding local banks. She has a few articles on her website, solari.com, that acts as a guide for local bank hunting, and I do have her website posted in my description. I'll also have a link to the full episode of this interview in my description as well. I do recommend checking it out. It's definitely a ride. It's so trippy, but it's worth it. Anyway, that'll be all for me. If I don't see you in the comments, leave me a thumbs up to let me know that you're here, and I can't wait to see you in my next episode.